Welcome to episode 10 of the Caution Free podcast. I'm your host, Colton Sutley, along with my co-host, Tim Friedhaber. And we got Ryan Montgomery right here. Uh, super late model driver. But just want to start out to ask him with your backstory with racing and how you got started and on that stuff.
Yeah, so my dad raced pure stocks and street stocks and semi-lates probably in the early 90s to the late 90s in Winchester, Hagerstown, Cumberland area. That's kind of where my mom and dad's from. And so when I was born, he started his business and kind of stopped racing for a little while. And then when I turned 7, he gave me the option to get a go-kart or a dirt bike. And I said I wanted a dirt bike, and he bought a go-kart. So then we started doing circle track go-kart racing on dirt and concrete. And then probably when I was 13 in 2010, I think is when we moved to a UMP mod. So ever since then, it's been slowly just kind of climbing the ranks and doing, great stuff. And then we just moved into supers a couple years ago. So
Okay. When you raced go-karts, was there a big difference between going back from dirt to asphalt or?
So no, I mean there was a lot of different setup wise. So when we raced concrete stuff, it was a lot of left side weight versus dirt wasn't. But we mostly just ran concrete in the winter, just because when the outdoor stuff stopped, that's when the concrete stuff kind of started. And we only did like a couple concrete shows a year, like Motorama's coming up, King of the Concrete, which isn't really, they don't really have that race anymore. And then they have Battle at the Barn and stuff like that out west. But they also had indoor go-karts for dirt too. So it was kind of a mix of that really. We didn't really race a whole lot of concrete stuff or stuff like that, just a few select times every year.
You got a question?
Yeah,
I ask?
sorry. So why late models? Why late
Uh,
models instead of like sprint cars or something?
Sprint cars are like really, really cool. Wingless sprint cars, in my opinion, are really, really cool. But um, you know, that's just what my dad was always in. That's what he loved to do, and that's just kind of where I'm from. There's not really I mean, there's some guys that run sprint cars. Obviously, you have the Ohio Valley Sprint Car Association and stuff. But just really, I guess, just the ease of when I started to race, the racetracks that were closer to us and were easily accessible were like UMP and crates kind of started and supers. So it's just kind of like where I was, and you could go down to the bottom part of West Virginia and run a modified or just barely into PA, and then obviously the Ohio Valley is pretty big on UMP mod stuff. So that's kind of where we leaned toward, just because it was a little bit easier. And then my dad also had some experience running a semi late back in the 90s, which of course from like middle of 90s to 2010s when I started, there was obviously a big jump in technology. But we just we weren't really interested in sprint cars because, like, obviously at that time we would have had to travel to Central PA and that kind of stuff, and it was just easier to go into like that kind of stock car around the house.
You have raced at some tracks in like Central PA, correct? Like
Hmm.
what I think Jayla said before, like you raced at like Williams Grove and Port Royal. If I
Never been to Williams Grove. We're supposed to go to the Grove on the 22nd. Raced at like Steelens Grove, Port Royal, Path Valley, Hagerstown, Winchester, kind of like over in that area. That's predominantly like a sprint car type of world over there. But yeah, it's, I mean, anywhere that pays money. We have a rule of thumb is every hour we travel, it's got to be at least $1,000. So if we travel 3 hours, it's got to be a 3,000 to win. If we travel 5 hours, it's got to be a 5,000 to win. Obviously, that comes into a different effect when you're trying to run a series. You just kind of go wherever they say to go, right? So
yeah.
that's what we've been doing the last couple of years. Before that, we kind of just did like that outlaw type schedule where we would just go hit and miss certain races and certain racetracks.
Yeah. So like when you were growing up, and was there like any like drivers you were like looked up to or kind of, or even like as you moved on into your career, like even though you weren't a kid anymore, but you were so young in your career, like anybody you looked up to?
Yeah, so like when I was younger, to me, stock car racing really didn't exist, right? I didn't look into it like that. It was like we solely focused on go-karts. We did that. I mean, I had back-to-back years, 2 years in a row, right before I started stock car racing, where together I won 110 features and 17 national championships. So we were up and down the road all the time. But like those guys were like, Jamie Knopf, Todd Miller, Paul White, Mike Dickerson. Those were the big name guys, and Donnie Knoll too, and Hunter Curtis. Those guys were like dominant in go-kart stuff. Of course, most of them were factory riders and stuff like that for the go-kart stuff.
So, wow, I don't want to word this. What is your like biggest win you've ever had? Or the most like meaningful win to you?
Um, I would say probably go-kart wise would be Junior Big Dog, which was a Georgia karting complex. It was Thanksgiving Thunder is what they called it. Like go-kart racing as a junior, you have 3 big races a year: Junior Kahuna, Junior Big Dog, and Maxis Nationals. I was lucky enough to win the Maxis Nationals and Junior Big Dog, never won Junior Kahuna. But in stock cars, I would say probably the World Challenge at Virginia Motor Speedway. I was really close to winning the World Championship for fast track. And I think I got my first Rush late model win at Applefest probably 2011, at Sharon, which was pretty cool. That was pretty meaningful. You always, I don't know how this is for a lot of people, but you always strive to win races, right? But you always strive to win to where like you wake up the next morning and you have this like butterfly feeling in your stomach, right? So those were a couple of those moments where I was like actually thought that I accomplished something really, really cool. Obviously when I won the Applefest Rush 4 race, it was I think I was 14 at the time, and that was my first year ever full time in a crate. So it was a really big accomplishment for my team and myself.
So with having raced at a bunch of different tracks, is there like a favorite that comes to mind, or like multiple favorites?
Yeah, so I have a running top 5 list in my head that just constantly changes. Obviously, it depends on how I do at the racetrack. If I don't do good at the racetrack, it doesn't make my top 5, which is unfortunate because some of those racetracks, their facilities and the work that everybody puts in is crazy. But right now, I would say my top 5 is PPMS has been my number 1 since probably 2011 or 12 when I first ran there. Ohio Valley's a close second. West Virginia Motor Speedway is third. Tyler County's fourth. And I would say that Lernerville is probably my fifth, even though Lernerville and I have a very love-hate relationship, because like I can do really good there, but then there's times where I have struggled there. And that red clay it throws you for a loop sometimes, especially last year at the Firecracker, because it would rain in between heat races and B mains, and it was crazy. But yeah, that's probably my running top 5. Like I said, it constantly changes. I would say Outlaw too, in Dundee, New York is close to that top 5. We won there last year, and I struggled there the first couple of times I went, but those are some of my favorite places to race. I always look forward to going to those places and racing, and a lot of them are close to home. But yeah, those are probably I would say top 5, top 6.
Yeah, I watched Casual Flow Night Racing in America race at Tower County this past season, and you were doing pretty well there. When you think of like again going against like national level series and stuff, always kind of rooting for like a non-national team that doesn't have like the super crazy budget like some of the like the Rocket car or the Longhorn house car and stuff. So it was impressive to see how well you were doing and stuff. And just like the Lucas Oil race a week ago at All Tech, I was rooting for the Joseph Joyner on the front guy, because like you don't see those types of guys winning out or Lucas Oil or Outlaw type races. So hopefully this year you can pull off maybe.
Yeah, I've told a couple people I've had a special place in my shop to hang those checks when I eventually hopefully win one, if I get lucky enough to win one. Those guys are tough, and And in this day and age, the cars being so close, those guys have engineers and a bunch of different like assets, obviously because they want to be the best. And I get why, everybody wants to be the best, but for like a not necessarily, I won't say an underfunded team compared to them, our funding is nowhere near their funding, but for like me, my dad, Terry, Brad, just everybody just trying to put our heads together just to figure it out. And we've had a lot of help throughout the way too, obviously. I think that means a big difference of somebody just helping you tune a little bit here or there. It's just to run good with those guys, really to make those shows is a big deal for us when they come into town. But up at Marion Center, I won my first Outlaw heat race last year. Unfortunately, ended up upside down in that feature. But at Castro Flow Night in America race, we ran pretty good, qualified good, just kind of missed it in the feature. But if you miss your setup just a little bit, you can just go for broke really quick. So hopefully this year to put a whole night together with those guys and get a really good run.
Well, speaking of Marion Center last year, I'm going to kind of steal. Tim was really looking forward to asking this question, but there was a viral quote about that involved what happened at Marion Center that you said at the Dome I guess it's technically this past year since it was in December, but want to talk about a little bit about that and how the Dome was.
Yeah, the Dome is if you've never been, I would recommend 1,000% to go, whether you're driving, watching, whatever. It's an event in itself, right? The only thing that I compare it to is we went and ran the Tulsa Shootout in 2009 and won it in 2009 in a go-kart, and indoor racing and stuff. I've always loved indoor racing, go-kart wise, and now that Cody and that whole team has put together that event, it's just there's nothing else like it. And that's one of the racetracks where it's like driver etiquette doesn't necessarily mean the same as like racetracks around here, because you're not given an inch, you can't take an inch. It's just everybody's just basically just beating the crap out of one another. But this year was I flipped over. I had my moment of fame, I guess. Not really the moment of fame that you really want, but I flipped over. I said a couple curse words. Got back to the hotel. My mom was very unhappy. But it's just you're pumped up with adrenaline. They shove a mic in your face, and that's just it is what it is. I've never been the person to sugarcoat something and not tell you what I think. So even with the amplified adrenaline, it makes it a little bit even worse. But we just flipped her back over. She fired back up, which Dad said that was kind of the dumbest thing to do. And we put her up against the fence and ran the rest of the feature. And then, because of that, we ended up making the big race. And I think I was up to 6th or 7th in the big race. I was coming from the back. And we had a left rear flat like the last 5 laps. And that, like I said, that race is just, you're up on the wheel the entire time. Like that race at the end of the race is the most wore out I usually get out of the whole year, because you're riding the fence, or you're on the inside, you're door banging somebody, or somebody's door slamming you, or whatever. But it's just good, hard racing. And a lot of people, they come there for the first time, they get a little upset, or they get a little angry with how sometimes the driving deal goes down. But it's a different etiquette, right? It's just, you get halfway up somebody's quarter pound, you got to shoot the gap. If you don't, you're going to get passed by 4 other guys, because they don't care. I'm not saying that you don't care about your equipment, you don't do something like crazy, but it's definitely just a different mindset, and it's a all around great event. I think it's just nothing else to compare it to.
Yeah, and like we talked about it on one of our earlier episodes, like how some of the racing was and stuff, and I was just like, it's the Dome. And then when the Chili Bowl, we talked about the Chili Bowl and how Cannon McIntosh kind of what he did to the team as and
Destroy them.
stuff. And I was just like, it's the Chili Bowl. Like, you're racing and
you're just going all out as hard as you can. I mean, I don't really necessarily if I agree with what happened to Team Ez. I'm a little bit on Team Ez's side, but because they're both in transfer spots and stuff. But that sort of stuff happens. You just got to go all out. Can't give anybody an inch. And That's why everybody watches the Chili Bowl. That's why everybody watches the Dome. I mean, they have their haters, obviously. I think a little bit more towards the Dome. There's a little bit more hatred than the Chili Bowl because obviously everybody loves the Chili Bowl. And the Chili Bowl doesn't tear up as much as the Dome, just because I think it's a little bit more suitable track for the cars. But they got a flip count, they got all that stuff at the Chili Bowl. So
Yeah.
Watching those guys set it up against the fence and let her eat is pretty cool. Watching late model guys go there and try to make it is pretty cool. It's just it's a different mindset, and nobody's raced for a little while, and you always have that little break, so everybody's like itching to get back after it. So yeah, it's just everybody wants to win, just like any other week, but sometimes those events just a little bit more because you're kind of etched in history.
Yeah. Would you ever race the Chili Bowl?
So I mean, if I had the opportunity, absolutely. My dad, on the other hand, might say a little different. He's a little skeptical. I got an opportunity one time at Dog Hollow to drive a 305 sprint car, and I was all game for it. And Dad was like, "If you get in that sprint car, you don't have a late model anymore." He's temperamental about sprint cars. I mean, their safety, obviously, everything racing wise, safety has come a long way, but it seems that like sprint cars and midgets and stuff, guys get hurt a little bit more. Just because, obviously they're in a little bit more confined space. There's a little bit more room in a late model for stuff to crush and kind of do its job and stuff like that. And but yeah, I mean, if I ever got the opportunity to, I would drive anything. If anybody would like, that's one thing about me. I don't care if I'm racing a 4-cylinder or if I get the opportunity ever in my life to race in the Cup Series or whatever. Not that I'm probably going to be able to. But I'll drive whatever, and I'll give you 150% every night. Sometimes, I can't figure setups out or whatever, but I'll drive. I won't give up. Dale Earnhardt had the mindset back in the day where if he had 4 tires up in the air, he was still going. And that's the mindset that I'd try to have.
Yeah, he flipped and had him flip it and said, "Does it still run?" and hopped right back in it.
Yeah, actually, when they flipped me back over, all my fuel and my bowls and my carburetor just kind of dumped on the ground. So I was like, man, I don't know if this thing's gonna like fire back up. So I just held my pedal to the floor for a couple seconds to try to fill the bowls back up with fuel, and then just dropped the gear, and she fired right back up. Didn't smoke, did nothing. So I was like, well, we're game. We'll go for it.
So obviously I can't say around here because I'm in West Virginia right now, but have you ever raced like Tri-City, Knox, or Mercer?
I raced Mercer once, I think, when I ran the Rush series, my first year. I ran Mercer one time. Never ran Knox, and never have been to Tri-City. I know, like, prior to me running the ULMS stuff, they had went to Tri-City a couple times. Or April, I think, that we'll probably try to go to. We're still trying to finalize our schedule. Right now we have 71 races on it that we are kind of game plan that we really want to go to. Obviously, money plays a factor, parts plays a factor. We work 40 hours, 50 hours a week, trying to run sometimes more, trying to run a company. So that obviously plays in a factor too. So, we're going to try to race as much as we can, but hopefully we'll get to all of them that I got wrote down on my schedule.
So are there any like bucket list tracks that you want to race at? Like, I don't know, like well, I don't know too much about late model like tracks. Like, what are some of the big ones? But like, what are some of the ones that like are on your personal bucket list?
Really, we go any place that I really want to go to. It's just money aspect, right? As white. And it's just like, is it smarter for us to travel far distance, or is it easier for us to stay at home and race for $2,000-3,000 and kind of put some money in our pockets to buy other parts and tires and stuff like that for maintenance and everything? But I would say there's probably 2 that I can think of off the top of my head. One of them is obviously Eldora, and that's a world famous racetrack that I've never been to. It's tough to go out there and race on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Yeah.
And then usually 90% of the time around the house, they got something that's like, when I was going to go run the World 100 one year, and then Cumberland actually had a Queen City 50 race for $4,000 to win, and it was $3,000 to start the world. So I just was like, I'll just kind of stay home and see how it plays out. I ended up winning. So it kind of worked out for us. But and then obviously the other one is it's predominantly, I think it's predominantly a sprint car track, but I want to go to Kokomo like really bad.
Yeah.
They've had a Lucas guys there a couple times, and I've watched USACs on Flow, so I watch a lot of USAC stuff, and there in Lawrenceburg is like it just looks like it would fit me, just wide open, get up on the cushion, let it rip. So I think those two places would be really cool.
Yeah, I like Kokomo's on my bucket list to go watch a race. So it's just they always puts on really good racing and stuff. And if I ever go, I'm gonna play that like I can't remember who sang. I think it's like the Beach Boys or something. They like the Kokomo song or something. And play like play that and just go to Kokomo. But so like do you have like a preference with like big or small tracks or like what kind of style tracks like do you prefer?
So when I first started racing cars, go-karts were always straight line stuff. So I pertain more to the bigger racetracks now that I've been in cars for a little while, and I haven't really been going to big racetracks since I started driving for SUPA. I don't really care. It doesn't really matter to me. If they're paying the money, I'll go. It doesn't,
Yeah.
everybody says that bigger racetracks are harder on your equipment and stuff like that, which I get it if you wreck, but you could blow a motor at Blanket Hill or wherever. It's small racetracks, so I actually went to Blanket Hill and tested, and I went through two dry shafts and a transmission testing for the dome. So I don't really have a preference. Obviously the driving styles are very different, but it's always, I think when you're traveling with a series and stuff and you go from a small racetrack to a big racetrack the next day, it's those guys that are still fast and they still succeed. They can adapt to their driving styles, and that's kind of what I want to be. I want to be able to run big and small and I'm not scared of anything. So racing wise, obviously there's other things that scare me in real life, but I think it's just so that way you can be more versatile and you're adapting to driving style.
Is it the same way with like how like the track's prepared? Like you don't have a preference on like how it's gonna be come feature time?
Well, like preferably, I think this is with every driver. They want at least two grooves. I guess unless you start on the pole and it's already rubbered up, then you're just like, man, and you're just like licking your chops because you don't make a mistake, don't hop out of the rubber. But if there's two grooves, I like a little character. I don't really mind if it gets rough. I know people that own their own equipment obviously don't like it to be a little rough. But yeah, I mean, I think if it gets a little rough, it gets it more entertaining. I mean, if you watch East Bay from last night, it was a little choppy back and forth, but it gave good racing. Whatever puts on a great show for the fans, I think, just to get more people coming back is the main thing. But like I said, two grooves, if it's smooth or if it's choppy, it doesn't really bother me any. I just prefer to have two grooves, and if not two grooves, just hopefully it doesn't take rubber. So.
Yeah, two grooves or more because you don't want to watch people just rolling around the bottom or everybody just around the top. You kind of want it to where guys can work around the track and make passes and stuff.
Right, and then a lot of times too, I mean, it comes down to like when you're doing those races like that, I mean, I don't know how it is sprint car racing because they do their passing points and all that kind of stuff and stuff like that, and that stuff kind of confuses me. But to each its own, right? That's what they do, so I respect it. We do ours is kind of there's stuff about our system that I don't really like either. You qualify, you run a heat race, and then a lot of the series and a lot of locals racetracks, they'll just redraw, which I didn't spend 30, 40 hours in my shop working on my race car, making sure it was going to be top notch and prepared to set fast time, win my heat race, and then to draw like a 6 or an 8, and I'm supposed to start outside pole or start pole. So that's a little frustrating. And they say they want it for the fans, which is absolutely fine. If they want to do that, that's great too. Just give us two grooves. There's been a lot of racetracks that we went to that just they're not two groove. They're one single lane, and if you start 5th or 6th, then you end up 5th or 6th, and it's like, well, now it's just all what I got out of it is based on my pill draw. I did everything right, but I didn't pill draw correctly. So that's kind of frustrating, but it is what it is. I know taking care of a racetrack is like setting up a race car, right? There's no perfect science to it. And there's, you got to depend on the weather and how much you water it and how much you till it. And, listen to a lot of your local drivers. They don't want a rough racetrack. And and stuff like that. So I mean, I get that point too, but you know, I just that the redraw, man, sometimes it just grinds my gears, you know.
Yeah. I don't know. The only series that, or the only thing that I know about sprint car wise that does passing points is the Chili Bowl, but I'm sure there's like some other series, but like I think, well, there's a sprint car podcast called Passing Points, so it has to be,
Yeah, and there's some late model shows that are passing points too. I get it. I mean, when I started racing go-karts at my local racetrack, we would not qualify. We would pill draw, which that's a whole nother thing that just drives me nuts for heat races. But for local level, I think it's okay. But we'd pill draw. You would line up for your heat races, how you pill draw. And then your second heat race that you would run, they would just invert from where your pill draw was. So if you started dead last in the first heat race, well, the second heat race, you're starting on the pole. Well, then they get both the points together, and that's how you would start the feature. Obviously, that's on a local go-kart level, which is not as many people or many cars and stuff like that. So, but that's kind of what I grew up doing, and that's what I like to do because it gives you the opportunity to pass, it gives you the opportunity to lead, which, you know, obviously go-kart racing starts at like 9 o'clock in the morning, you know, we can race during the day and stuff. Race cars, they can't necessarily do that. They start later in the nights, and a lot of them run on Fridays and stuff too. So, I mean, I see where they can't do that, and that's just more laps on motors and harder on equipment, longer on tires, stuff like that. But I don't know. That's just like some comfortability about that because that's just like where I started.
Do you think that's also why, like, with the doing more laps and more wear and tear on stuff is like why, like, well, at least nationally, the sprint cars always they have a dash race, and I've never seen late models run a dash, at least not that I can remember. Do you think that plays into why like the national series might not do a dash?
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know. It's not really like late model mentality, I guess, to have a dash. I think it was like at one point before my time. I mean, I ran some stuff. I ran a Mid Ohio Valley series in like 2018, 2017 that the top six were always locked into a dash when you qualified. So that was always cool. You didn't have to try to race your way in. You were always locked in. But you know, I think there's two folds to that. Like those sprint car guys, they're like, especially the national sprint car guys, the national late model guys, whatever you pretty much tell them, they're going to go race because what they got to do for a living, right? That's how they make money. That's how they put food on the table. So if you tell them to run a dash, they're going to run a dash. If you tell them you're not going to run a dash, so then it's just not going to do it. I mean, obviously for the coroners and stuff, it might be a little bit different for them, but you know, I think that allows you to have a little bit more time on the racetrack, log a little bit more laps, maybe try something. Because, you know, a lot of those times when you watch those sprint car dashes, there's one guy that was really good, and then he was kind of out in left field, and it's like, well, did he not change anything enough, or did he just try the kitchen sink to see if this was going to work, and then it didn't work? It gives you the opportunity to kind of do that, which is nice.
Yeah.
So, did you run full ULMS schedule last year?
Yes. Yep.
Is that your plan this year, or are you going a different way?
Yeah, that's our plan. We ran second in the points last year to Tyler Emery. He had like a breakout season. Really, I mean, you know, he won the Appalachian Mountain Speed Weeks, and I think he won at Bradford and Hummingbirds, the two races that he won with the ULMS this year. So he was super consistent and very tough to beat. We were pretty much like, we qualified close to the same spot, featured at the same spot, you know. So except for when we went to Bedford and Port Royal, which is his like bread and butter, and he waxed my butt. But you know, it's that kind of stuff happens. But yeah, we're gonna run the whole ULMS tour again this year. And on my schedule, we got, when the Outlaws come to town, we're gonna try to run with them and Lucas as well, and try to run the Appalachian Mountain Speed Weeks. You know, like I said, we're just gonna try to run probably the biggest schedule that I've ever ran in my entire life. We're kind of in a good place company wise, and you know, with Suppa helping and, you know, driving his stuff and running my dad's motors obviously too. So that kind of stuff helps, you know, teaming up with some people and having that knowledge to wherever you can travel around and not be kind of guessing when you get there. So that helps. And we're going to try to run as many races as we can, but we're definitely going to run all of the ULMS series.
What are some of your goals for this season? If you set goals, or if you just go out there and just, you know.
Yeah, I think it's always important to set goals. I think, you know, it's a goal that's pretty much continuous every year, because I haven't done it, is win an outlaw race or win a Lucas Oil race. Obviously that's few and far in between because those guys they're very tough. But I've been pretty close a couple times to 10 feature wins in a year, so I think that would be a big milestone for me to win 10 in 1 year. We've been kind of like around the 4, 5, 6, 7 mark. It seems like forever. But obviously, gotta have everything kind of go your way for a lot of those races, and I think we probably could reach that goal if I would run one racetrack like locally. But that just doesn't get me going, right? I want to be traveling. I want to go to different racetracks. I want to win the big checks. I think I'm pretty much obsessed with those. I don't get the real checks. I just get the big checks, so I just hang those in my shop and keep on going. So, but just making better memories traveling up and down the road. There's a lot of windshield time. Obviously not as much as national touring guys, but it's just that's our goal, is to probably get one of those feature wins this year, run pretty decent with them, and try to get at least 10 feature wins. And well, I guess another one is to win the ULMS title this year, because we came pretty close last year.
So I feel like the answer to this question will probably be yes, but would your long-term goal to be to run Lucas Oil or World of Outlaws?
I had the opportunity to do that when I was 18. I was going to graduate high school, and I didn't think I was ready for it. I had just been in a super probably on and off between some certain guys. Like I only had like a handful of races in a super. We were predominantly running crate stuff. I didn't really get full time in supers until I was a sophomore in college. And I just told my dad I just wasn't really 100% ready for it. And I just spending most of my childhood on the road and go-karts, like, winning 55 races. Like I said, I won 110 races in those 2-year spans and 17 championships. Wasn't school a lot. Of course, I had a really laid back, cool principal. There was a couple guys that were a couple years ahead of me that were racing cars, and they let me just do my work on the road as long as I turned everything in. And it's just life up and down the road. I mean, like when you're winning, it's great, but when you're not running good, it kind of sucks. It's you're struggling and you're just trying to put everything together. And we have our family business now that we all help with, and I don't think I want to run a full-time schedule with one of those guys, even though it would be cool to do. But I think it would be cooler to be one of those local guys that just knock off one of the big guys that when they come into town, which I think you saw that a little bit more often in the early 2010s than you kind of do now. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just that's a lot of effort and a lot of work, and trying to run a business and do that at the same time. I mean, I know Boom does it, but that's just like you're putting way too much stress on yourself, I think, and you gotta have a life a little bit outside of it. I like to go to the lake. I like to do some other things. So, I mean, if the right opportunity would ever present itself, then I obviously you couldn't say no. But just for us personally, trying to fund it and get stuff together, and obviously with Terry's help and stuff, I just don't think it's feasible for us to try to aim for that goal. So I don't think, looking forward, I don't think I would ever do it.
Yeah, like I just this week, Bill Baylog, like he's going for World Outlaw Rookie of the Year this year. Blew 2 engines and like 2 nights down at Volusia. Didn't have any more down there, so you had to hop in somebody else's sprint car and duct tape a number on the side,
Yep.
and just because he's running for points and stuff. And I'm just like that. And I think Daniel Adam, I think he was young kid trying to run for Lucas Oil.
Yeah, 75 car. Yep.
Yeah, he blew I think 2 engines or something down there as well, or not at Volusia, but like down there, like during speed weeks and stuff, and pretty early on, and having bad luck and stuff. So if you sign up for that, and your whole season can go to shit in a handbasket first
Yeah,
couple
absolutely.
nights out.
Like you gotta have, like, I don't ever like not complete something, like that's just like if I would ever say that I was going to do it, I would do it all the way through. A lot of those guys, especially the Rookie of the Year guys, you kind of see them drop off, whether it's like, obviously if you blow 2 motors, that's like a big deal for,
Yeah.
especially for teams. That's a lot of money. So that's like money you didn't account for. It's like, oh, I'm not going to go down here and blow these two motors up in the first couple of races. So, but you know, everybody got to chase their own dreams. So, you know, if that's your dream, then absolutely chase for it. But it's tough. Like, you know, winning all the time is great. That's, you know, your rock star, you know, all that kind of stuff. But you don't ever see the stuff behind the scenes where these guys are like we were watching, we were talking about that before, is where Macedo broke last night at Volusia, and they were, you know, those guys were just working their tails off trying to get back together. Luckily, he got a red flag. Unluckily for the people that were in red flag, he got back out there. But that's part of it. You just gotta, and no matter how much you maintain or how much you think you're prepared, like something weird like that could happen, and then you're just kind of like out in left field and just rushing around trying to get stuff back together.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, well, you know, every racing is just like every other sport, and you know, like life, you don't know what's gonna happen from what you think one thing's gonna happen, and then next thing you know, you're like, well, I gotta go do something completely different because not just went the completely wrong way. Do you have another question lined up, or?
Yeah, sure. So do you prefer like the Lucas Oil series or the Outlaw series?
Um, I think that I don't have a preference on which one. I think the Lucas Oil may be a little bit more of heavy hitters from time to time, and that kind of changes from year to year, right? But this year I think they got some pretty stout guys that have been running their stuff, and obviously the Outlaws have they're no slouches over there either. But I think I retain more towards Lucas just because they're kind of closer to my house in the sense of, like, especially this year with the Hillbilly and PPMS only being like an hour and a half from my house. And you know, the Outlaws, they do their 4 race swing through here, which is pretty cool at Raceway 7 and Marion Center, Bedford, and Path Valley, that'll be pretty cool. Path Valley is like, I only went there one time, and it was last year for a ULMS race. I ran a go-kart around that track years and years ago, and it was a bad little boring. It was freaking awesome. It was wide open, get up on the top. Didn't really know if I was going to squeeze in between two or couple of those guys, but I did. And yeah, it's a cool little racetrack. So I don't really have a preference, but just really I like to win one or the other, just one time. That's, you know,
Fair.
well, I'll say that, and I'll win one time. I'm like, man, I want to do it again. You know, just keep
Yeah.
going. But
You're 1-1. You're one like the Lucas Oil, and then you'll want to get an outlaw win, so
oh
you
yeah,
can be in both.
that would be nice. I doesn't even have to be like the Firecracker or something. You know, it could be a prelim night for the Firecracker. You know, I just want one of those freaking jacks. That's it. You know, I can
Yeah.
hang up on my wall, and I'll tell my kids that I won the Firecracker 30 years from now. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, that's what when we were seniors in high school, we won the district championship in football. So I got like one of the medals. So that'll be me in like 30 years. I was like, yeah, or like even like grandkids being like 75 years old. I was like, yeah, way back in like 40 or 60 years ago, I like, you know, was out on the field in the game, like it was when we scored the one touchdown, and
yeah.
you know, just old as hell, just, you know, looking back. But yeah, it'd be, I personally, I like it when like the underdog type drivers win races, like against the national series, like guys that haven't won a national race, even if they're on tour or if it's just some local guy and stuff. Like we were at the Silver Cup 3 years ago, and
Yeah.
Silence dominated the whole night. Quick time, won his heat, won the dash, started on the pole, led a bunch, led like half the race, and then I think I heard on like a podcast a couple months later that he said like something broke on the car, and but you know, I think it was Brad Sweet ended up winning it,
Yeah.
so it's kind of like kind
And
of
then a downboard in typical
oh yeah,
lernerville fashion.
yeah, then it just started downpouring, but
Yeah, I think too is with the bigger name guys, which I don't think sprint cars run as many laps. I think they run like 25 to maybe as most 50. I'm not 100% sure. I know they're fuel
yeah,
tanks and they run alcohol, so they burn a lot quicker gas wise.
yeah,
we run 100 lappers and stuff in late models. And I think when the bigger guys come to town and we run those 100 lap races, they have way more of those logged laps just for driver preference, right? Because the racetrack's obviously going to change a whole heck of a lot in those 100 laps with 20 some cars on there. And as a local driver, you don't get to run a lot of 100 laps. You may run 40 or 50 laps or whatever for those bigger shows for regional stuff. But trying to run the extra 50 is the hardest part, where a lot of those guys the national touring guys will really shine those last 50 laps because somehow they're still keeping pace, but they're not wearing their stuff out, and they know how to do that versus a lot of like regional guys that don't ever get that opportunity to run those 100 lappers.
Yeah, I think a lot of I think like Lernerville, like I think for the sprint cars and the super late models, they're both like 25, 30 lap features weekly, and then like when like the big sprint car tours come, it's like 30 to 40. And then there's a couple races that run like 50, and then they always have like a fuel stop in the middle
Right.
because you can they count like the caution laps and everything, pace
Mhm.
laps, and to like make sure they have enough fuel to when to stop. But like the late models, it's like just you know
Yeah,
race the 100 some laps. Well, and then the Lucas finale, Brandon Shepherd ran out of gas on the
Mhm.
last lap.
And that's not, I mean, even then too, you could say even about the big block guys, those big block guys, they run a lot of laps. They log a lot of laps too for like, I guess it's Fonda or Super Dirt Week. And I don't know. I don't think Super Dirt Week's at Fonda, but please don't come at me, big block modified guys. I'm not 100% sure.
Oh, we don't know. No, we hardly know anything about modifieds. Just have the pedal on the right makes them go.
Yeah.
But so pretty much the last question. Unless Tim, you got any more before I
No,
ask?
no, go ahead.
So, well, the last question, it's more for us as people that are trying to do like get into like the podcast and content creation of for like the dirt racing and stuff. Like when is the best time out of track, like during a race night, to like come up to a driver and do like a real short interview of like a couple questions real quick, like you always see like people posting on like the internet just real quick.
Yeah. I mean, I think after the races is probably best time, is when everybody's kind of like relaxing and everything's already happened and it's going to happen. And sometimes beforehand, it just depends, and you can do in between stuff. I know it just kind of depends on how fast paced the night is, right? Like for, like East Bay this week, for instance, they're the only class there. So supers are, so it's tough to really get that in there because those guys
Yeah.
are thrashing around trying to get stuff adjusted and stuff changed. But on a regular local night, I think that it's you've got time in between the heat races, you got time in between if you got to run a B main or qualifying and stuff like that. Really, practice qualifying is kind of like back to back sometimes for regional stuff, but um, and it all just depends on how many crew guys you got. You got 10 crew guys that know their role
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff, or is it just the dad and his son, working on the race car? Because I've seen guys where they're dad and son and they don't stop working like at all. And like it's just insane. That's how me and my dad were when we first started. And now we got some crew guys and we got some help and stuff like that really makes a difference to where for me personally it's like I can go up and watch the racetrack. I can really think about like how can I make my car better, and I don't have to worry about I got to take this shock off and pound this body back out and look at my tires, make sure they're wearing good and stuff like that. And obviously as a driver, you still worry about all those things. You still look at those things and you help out when you can, but it just takes that little bit of an edge off that really helps you kind of hone in and give you your best opportunity. Not saying that sometimes I get the best opportunity that I can, and I guess absolutely totally wrong on the racetrack. And Terry and my dad, we obviously and Brad bounce ideas off of each other and try to get the best outcome of it. A lot of times, sometimes when we're really bad, we'll just throw the kitchen sink out of it and we'll be 9 times worse. But you just gotta have the help of the racetrack and stuff like that. But I think, your best bet is, I would say after the races, or maybe, you know, if there's a time in between for features and heat races and stuff like that, would probably be my best guess. But a lot of guys after the feature's over, man, they're loaded
Yeah.
up. I'm going to get a beer, I'm like, I want to drink a beer and just give me a second to catch my breath or something. We could talk about what the race car did and what I did wrong and what I did good and stuff like that. But yeah, I think after the races or maybe before the feature would probably be your best bet.
Yeah, I thought well, just thinking about it, I was like, probably if you either like after the races or like well before the drivers meeting, because like I feel like once they have the drivers meeting, like it's like not like even if there's other like support classes or whatever, it's just pretty much like I feel like once the driver meetings start, it's like I guess it's like time to work and
Yeah,
you know
I
you
mean,
don't want to be bugged.
everybody's different, right? Everybody's got their what they like to do and uh how they go about doing things and stuff like that. But I mean, for me personally, if I got downtime, I'll talk to anybody. It doesn't really matter. I'm just if I like to walk, I don't usually ride the four-wheeler or golf cart or anything, just because it gives me time to think and look and really. Well, that and my dad's knees are bad, so he usually takes those and gets it going. But yeah, I mean, like if I have any downtime, I'm always open to talk to anybody. If somebody else looks at the racetrack maybe a little differently than I am at the moment, I might put a little seed in my head and be like, oh, maybe I could do this or do that differently. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it's all just really depends on personal preference too.
Yeah, I wanted to ask like you or like even like maybe like one of the other like more like local or regional drivers because it's like like if we go to like a national series race, it's like the national guys they're most likely not doing anything to the car. And it's not because they don't know how necessarily, it's because it's they're paid to drive
Yeah.
and they have guys that are supposed to work on it. And while like a Joe Blow from down the street, he's doing it by himself or, might have like one or two guys helping and it's like, you don't want to go up and like interrupt them while they're doing something or cause them to be behind on what they have to get ready for, whether it's the feature or even just, unloading the car stuff. But, um, yeah, that's pretty much it for this episode. But I did lie. There is one more question. Are there like any sponsors or anybody you want to give a shout out to or thank?
Yeah, definitely Terry Suppa Racing. My dad, for all his help throughout the years. Montgomery Homes, TJ Contracting, Newlands International Sales, Bomax Equipment Sales, Stone Ridge Properties, Clemens Race Engines, K2 Engineering, Central Supply, Race Carpet, and like I said, Terry, Brad, Gary, Michelle, everybody that comes, Rod Johnson Construction, he's been helping us out a good bit. And, it's just everybody that comes helps me. I know I'm probably forgetting some, but, we're definitely a local regional type team that really has really good sponsors behind us now. And, we're obviously always looking for more. Because tires are not getting cheaper, fuel is not getting cheaper. But it's a tough thing to do, tough hobby to do, very expensive hobby. And for those people that do help me, I mean, I greatly appreciate them because I couldn't be where I am without them.
Well, thanks for coming on and doing this with us. So if you people watching, go support them and stuff and go to a local track and, support the local drivers and the local tracks and, try to save a little extra cash to go to a big national series to see somebody like Ryan pull an upset over one of the big series. But we're on pretty much everything on social media and you can watch us on YouTube, listen to us on Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts. Like, comment, subscribe, rate 5 stars, follow, on that crap that you have to do for all the different ones. And well, this is the end of the episode. So yeah.